Well, I wouldn't say he's too tall, but he is tall. And therefore it's possible to hide behind him. You could hide behind him very easily. See, there you go. Just like that. Yeah. Where's Theo? Okay, let's start with Geeta Dhyana. O Bhagavad Gita, by which Arjuna was illumined by Lord Krishna himself, and which was composed of 18 chapters within the Mahabharata by the ancient sage Vyasa. O Divine Mother, destroyer of rebirth, who showers the nectar of oneness upon us. O Bhagavad Gita, my affectionate mother, on thee I meditate. All the Upanishads are the cows. The milker is the cowherd boy, Krishna. Arjuna is the calf. People of purified intellect are the drinkers, and the milk is the supreme nectar of the Gita. My salutations to the Lord, who is the source of supreme bliss, whose grace makes the mute eloquent, and the crippled cross mountains. Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay. So we're still enumerating the qualities, the characteristics of the demoniacal, within and without. Within and without. Of course, it's without because it's within. In other words, we see it outside because it's in. It's in each of us, in the psyche. The potential is there. And we all have experience with some of this. So, and what Lord Krishna here is doing is going through in its most expressive state, this demoniacal. So we can say, well, I don't have that much, but it's not about that, of course. So, continuing. Yeah, let's pick up from here. Filled with insatiable desires, full of hypocrisy, pride, and arrogance, holding evil ideas through delusion, they work with impure resolves. And we recognize these evil ideas are very simple. What's being discussed is very simple. I want, I need.
Very selfish.
It starts with that. It's any expression really of selfishness is an expression of this demoniacal nature, what's being called this. And as we had discussed yesterday, it starts with ignorance. So as a result, everyone not recognizing the capital S self in all, still suffering from some ignorance. So the ground then supports the arising of these I want, I need, if only. Yeah. We all have the if only disease. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what's being called evil ideas. But in the greater expression, then it gets quite dastardly. They work with impure resolves. So, what's an example of an impure resolve? Who can do? Just to demonstrate. You know what a resolve is?
Decision to do.
It's a choice but resolve is I shall do, right? Or I shall not do.
Not beneficial.
So give an example of an impure resolve.
I want to go get drunk tonight.
There you go. Okay.
Going out for dinner on Friday.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Oh, okay. Giving themselves over to immeasurable cares, ending only with death, regarding gratification of lust as their highest aim, and feeling sure that's all there is, bound by 100 ties of hope, given over to lust and anger, they strive to obtain by unlawful means hoards of wealth for sensual enjoyments, and then continuing. And now Lord Krishna quotes this nature. Quote, "This has been gained by me today. This desire I shall obtain. This is mine, and this wealth shall also be mine in the future. That enemy has been slain by me, and others shall I also slay. I am the Lord. I enjoy. I am perfect. Siddha, powerful and happy. I am rich and born in a noble family. Who else is equal to me? I will sacrifice. I will give charity. I will rejoice." And then he says, "Thus deluded by ignorance, bewildered by many a fancy." And these fancies can be small or large, right? "Entangled in the snare of delusion, addicted to the gratification of lust." And really any addiction for me is that. They fall into a foul hell.
That's like the reminder, whether it's Saturday's reminder days. Yeah, what's his name?
Ravana.
Ravana. That's Ravana. Yeah, Ravana illustrates the expression of it all the way out when it's when it has full control. Here in us, there's a battle inside. With Ravana, battle's done. And there's no end to it. This is it's incredible. It's incredible the dastardly deeds that humanity is capable of. It's just incredible. But this is this nature run amok. And the potential exists within every one of us if we allow it to run amok. Because there's no satisfaction of it.
More.
So, a little more. Self-conceited, stubborn. Stubborn, do you notice that nature is stubborn? Yes? Filled with pride and intoxication of wealth, whatever it is that has or could have. They perform sacrifices in or for name out of ostentation, contrary to scriptural ordinances. Given over to egoism, power, haughtiness, lust, and anger, these malicious people hate me, so Krishna or the Absolute, in their own bodies and those of others. So some discussion, there's some commentary here on these, all of this really, but these last two. And some discussion on sacrifice. Swamiji, this is Swami Venkatesh, he says there are three types of sacrifices. Sacrifices in Sanskrit, yagna. We could say worship as well. One day, I don't know, 2 years ago, something like that, I was in Yuma and with a small group, we were on Upanishads in the chapel. We were talking about Kata Upanishad. And the concept of sacrifice came up, and I was asked about the meaning of sacrifice. And so I had to wait. And because there's an idea of sacrifice, but it's a very limited idea of sacrifice. Like to give up something or to give something of yourself or to do something in order to gain something. But the person who asked the question, he said he had that question years before, and he was told and then looked at it. He said that sacrifice is from Greek. The English word sacrifice is from Greek, and it's two words. It's sacre, and fiche. And fiche, we might have some recollection of. Fiche means to make. And sacre is sacred. So literally the meaning of the word sacrifice in its real sense is to make sacred. To make sacred. And so this body is the temple. We're not this body, but there's a purpose of the body. And Peace Pilgrim used to say it like this: this body is the temple. It's the place that we reside within and the place in which one can make oneself holy. So really life is a sacrifice. But that's not the negative sense. That's you see, sacrifice in this way is a life-affirming word. Right? How can I make this holy? How can I make it sacred? How can I make life sacred? Oh. So he says 3 types of sacrificers are especially mentioned in the Gita. The first one is Jnana Yajna, which is dissemination of spiritual knowledge, which is dear to the Lord. So that's discussed in the 18th chapter again, in fact, which is the one who knows is to share. And that's an offering of knowledge or wisdom. The second is Japa Yajna, which is repetition of the divine name or mantra, which is the Lord's own special manifestation. Swamiji is referring to the mantra being the Lord's own special manifestation because the mantras, here's the power of mantra, the mantras are of God, they are God, and they have a special power, which is simply if you occupy the mind with them, they uplift the mind to the divine estate. If you really occupy the mind with it. Yeah. Oh. So it is discussed in the Gita. It's discussed in all the teachings. This is the sound, and this mind, it relates to it as a sound or a word or something like that, but it's not, for God's sakes. The mantra is God. Yes. The mantra is God in form. It's a very special manifestation. Right? It's in the wavy bit. The wavy bit is where everything's moving and there's sounds and thoughts and desires and but the wavy bit, we just finished the Supreme Purusha. But the wavy bit is what? Whose wavy bit is it?
It's the Lord's.
It's the Lord's wavy bit. So show me a place where there's no God there. The mind imagines that there's some place until it doesn't, until it finally stops trying to imagine that. Because wisdom permeates. Yeah. But for now, let's say, okay, it imagines that there's some place, but there isn't a place. And so the mantra also is God, but it's a very special manifestation, which brings clarity into the mind, which supports the clarity, which brings sattva, which is sattva. And then the third sacrifice, which is nama yajna, which nama is name. Swamiji says, which may mean either sacrifice merely in name. So we might, that is without the spirit or divine purpose behind it. So not a real sacrifice, an apparent one. The traditions, animal sacrifices and these kinds of things, but even offering flowers without having any divine connection in it, it's just in name. It doesn't have any merit. There's merit being in the space where they're offered, because the energy kind of rubs off. But in terms of there being any independent merit in us engaging in a practice with no bhavana, then there's not. But there is merit in being in the place.
But if we make it an offering for the Lord, then that bhava goes into the flowers.
Yeah. Oh, then it's an offering. Then it's not in name. But then he adds this other concept of this nama yajna, which is or sacrifice for the sake of winning name and fame, which he calls a publicity stunt. So doing something in order to puff up our, right? which would be most of the sacrifice in the world would be like that, to get something, to get recognized in a way.
Name of the hospital.
And that's what he says. He says the last is diabolical. And it's diabolical in the world, but it's also diabolical in us. It says, it is not the action itself that counts in the eyes of the Lord, but the spirit that motivates it. Hence, the sacrifice and the charity that these demons perform do not please him, for even these are geared to the destruction of others. Their charity is like the free gifts and prizes offered by rival firms as part of their sales promotion programs aimed at the destruction of others' business. Elsewhere in the Gita, it has been said that even they who hate God and thus think of him constantly also reach him. The hatred of the demons does not amount to that. And I don't know if we recall or if but there are stories, not that many, but there are stories where there are these great dastardly characters. I mean, demons, like Ravana is a demon in the same way, that have such hatred for God. Most of us are Rakshasa to some extent in between, don't have hatred of God, but also don't know God and therefore don't have love for him. But there are some characters that have great hatred for the divine. Why? Well, there's everything here. So, and those who have great hatred are fixated upon that Lord, that absolute.
Militant materialists.
Yeah. Well, you can judge them, but here's the thing. The only thing stopping you from being in union with who you are is this prattling on of the mind.
Yeah.
Non-single-pointed mind, where it's going. And actually, all that's needing to happen is for the mind to become single-pointed on the eternal. So the stories are that even the ones that are only thinking of God from the perspective of hatred and doing something in order to get even with God, still get union.
Right.
Because the mind becomes single-pointed on God.
Right.
Swami Premananda would tell these stories and laugh. But then he would say, but I don't advise this path because you might not complete it. In other words, if you were looking for a path, this path you might not want. It's called the dark path. It's not the path of light, it is the path of darkness. So the issue is if you don't complete it, in other words, if the mind doesn't become absorbed, then there is hell to pay. Because all of the karma is from... Hari, you've heard those stories.
Yeah, I've heard this story.
You've heard those stories, okay.
It reminds me from the Christian tradition, simple.
What is it?
Simple from the Christian tradition.
Okay.
He hated Jesus with all his heart, and he was like chasing the Christians. Back in the day, he was like killing all the Christians. And he hated so much Jesus that Jesus came to him at some point.
That's the same story. Wow.
And he became blind. And, he became a great devotee of Jesus. Actually.
It's the same story in a different tradition. Wow. Yeah.
How did someone complete the path on that path?
Well, there can't be any other thought. In other words, the mind has to be one-pointed, or absorption, where the mind, as it were, ceases to be because it's completely absorbed in one thought. One thought doesn't mean repetition of the same word over and over again. It means only seeing one reality. Right? So whatever happens, only one thought. Only one way of relating. That's samadhi. That's absorption of the mind.
Wouldn't there be karma?
Well, the karma doesn't relate to the soul. The karma only relates to the cloth that the soul is wearing. Body, mind. Body, mind. So you could say the body, mind has some karma, but the soul, free of it. Your soul. The issue is not... The issue, it's as if the soul is suffering. It's as if the soul is suffering. That's the experience, because the soul is the enjoyer, quote unquote enjoyer. And that's discussion from a couple of chapters prior, but that's consistent. And really in all the traditions, the soul is as if the enjoyer. We say as if, meaning we get so wrapped up. It's like you're sitting in a car and you're driving, and all of a sudden you take yourself to be the car, but you're not the car. You're not the car. So it's just an example, just an allegory to help to catch it. But if you took yourself to be the car, then you would suffer everything that the car experiences. And when the engine blows up, you would experience death because you've taken yourself to be the car. But you're the driver of the car. And in the same way, the soul is embodied. But this dose of Maya, this dose of ignorance, which brings us into an apparent union with the car, the cloth that's being worn. And so in essence, in truth, the soul is never this body. And also the soul is never actually bound. There's a story of this bondage. There's so many stories, and they're lovely stories, and they're all allegories, but they can help. This one has to do with a camel and the driver of the camel. There are still parts of the world where trade going through the desert, where camels are utilized as beasts of burden in order to carry items that are being bartered. And so camels are not very bright animals. And I've met some people through travels that know something about camels, and they're pretty mean-spirited as well. But we love them anyway. So the story is that these camel drivers, the merchants, will travel through the desert, sometimes for several days at a time, and they have to sleep. But the camel will wander off because it's not grounded. It will just, and if the merchant doesn't tie them down, but they're in the desert, in the dunes, what to tie them down with. So this is a real story in this way. This is really what they do. So if they sleep without tying them down, they will go away and they're gone. And now you're in the middle of the desert and you're going to die in the middle of the desert. So it's a big deal for the merchants. But there's nothing to tie them down to. So they carry a rope, and at that night time, they talk with the camel. They make a big show of this. This is in name stuff. They make a big show, big production of it. They wrap the rope, one end of the rope, around the camel's neck, and they tell the camel, okay, this is it. You're going to be tied up for the night now. And they would have trained it earlier about being tied up, and it would recognize that when I'm tied up, I can't move. So before they're out in the desert, they would have tied it up and tied it to a post so that it recognized. And they said, okay, now it's time for sleep. I'm going to tie you up. And so they do that. And then they come down near the feet where the camel can't see, and they make a big production, and okay, that's it. That is said to be the nature of the soul's bondage. It's the same. We are camels in the desert. being tied down with an imaginary rope. And so it's an imaginary relationship that the soul has with the body, with this body, taking itself to be, but it's not true. And so the path of awakening refers to the intellect, the conscious mind, this faculty that we identify ourselves with most. You're the light, your soul. You're not even this conscious mind, but the conscious mind is a special faculty. What we're doing now and the lifestyle that a yogi engages in is about bringing light to the conscious mind, purifying it, letting go of all of the binding notions, all of the limited notions, letting go of them one by one, and the behaviors that limit us, that cause us to continue to take ourselves to be limited, such as the addictive behaviors and the demoniacal behaviors, the self-centered behaviors. There is really no little self. But it speaks. It's a voice of shadow. It's a voice of smoke. It doesn't have an independent reality. Its reality is also the one absolute. And so what we're doing, what we're engaging in doing, is a process of negating it and affirming the one absolute, which is our own essence, our own reality. And it's being done in conscious mind. And also it's permeating the program, the reactive nature of us, so that we learn not to react in ways that are binding, that are cloying. We learn even to bring love into every situation, to free ourselves of these limited notions. And in doing so, we come closer and closer with conscious mind to the reality. Until finally the conscious mind becomes absorbed, it surrenders. And it says something like, I am thine, all is thine. And it comes to the place where it sees still the forms, but it relates to the essence because it's come to learn. That's the process of enlightenment. It comes to learn. And now there is light because the conscious mind, which used to choose to work for the smoke, conscious mind is an instrument that works, as it were. It decides to get up. It decides to move. So it is in relationship with this body, and it's really the principle. Conscious mind is the principle that's choosing to act or not to act. And so it's been choosing to act to a great extent to the self-centered interests, with the self-centered interest, this ego notion as its boss. But now it's learning, but that's a mistake. That's a mistake. So I didn't know like this. And finally it says, I am thine, all is thine. And from here, only the one is seen with the eyes, with the eye of wisdom. With the eye of wisdom. And so that looks like freedom. This what we talked about with Jivan Mukta the other evening. This is really, and this is said to be path of light. And there is a path of darkness. And the path of darkness is this demoniacal nature. And amazingly, it will also finally culminate, but it's a very painful process. After how many births, that even that demoniacal will finally become absorbed in the real. But that's where Swamiji would say, but I don't recommend it. Oh, is that?
Yeah, I'm envisioning Darth Vader. It reminds me of Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Darth Vader, of course, came from the light.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hero's journey stuff. Even in the movies, permeating the movies, so much of this is there. Yeah.
Yoda.
Yeah.
I think I'm grasping that the soul does not carry the karma.
Yes.
The mind body does. And
Yes.
I think this is new for me. I thought it was the soul before doing all the lives.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand,
Right.
is not the body and mind just borrowed for this temporary life? How does that work?
Body and mind, if you look to see what the body and mind are made of, you see the 5 elements, you see the pranas, you see intelligence, all of which are universal factor. So ultimately, they're also of the one. They're also of the one. But they're crafted of the one in a way that allows the one to experience. But the one never becomes many, it appears as many. And so, and experiences. But is not actually affected by the karma, although it's as if it is, because of that loss of the highest identity and the assertion of a lower identity. Which is so ignorance, avidya. Oh, okay, we'll close.
I hope I didn't just miss this explanation, phased out there for a second, but
Oh, dear.
because it's the karma carries over to the next lives, yeah?
The karma does, but the karma is never belonging to the soul.
It's the essence.
But as long as the soul takes itself to be the karmic instrument, then it will find itself in a state of bondage. But when the karmic instrument, in conjunction with the soul, comes to see that I am not what I took myself to be, I am soul, then the soul is free. But it's not something that the soul didn't ever have. That's why the camel story.
So what happens to the karma? It decimates?
Karma remains where the karma is.
So it's like part of it.
Nothing happens to the karma.
Right?
Nothing happens to the karma. But the karma is a law. It's inert in and of itself. In other words, this body has never been alive. This body has never been alive. Anytime you see an expression of life, if you look, and if you've ever been with anyone or anything that's died, you recognize, that body was never alive.
It's just animated.
It's animated by the life. And the life is a soul quality. Life is soul. Soul is life. So, again, it's a delusion. And we can see evidence of the delusion everywhere. If you look, when we learn to look deeper, we see evidence of the delusion everywhere. Oh my God, I thought you were alive. And you are alive, but you're not this body.
Just keeps bringing me back to those dissections I did so many times.
Yeah, the dissections.
Yeah.
And see, that's where we have experiences. You don't know why you have the experiences. But then later on, you're given the opportunity to reflect back on them to help you to see what you came here to do. What you came here to do. Oh.
I guess our question would be, like when a character like this is doing evil things, hating God, and then it seems as if he's becoming enlightened all of a sudden.
Well, the soul is freed. You could say like that. The soul is freed. But the characters are temporal, aren't they?
Right.
So, but don't you notice if one character of a certain behavior dies, disappears, goes back to dust, goes back to whatever it was before, then another one will arise?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that doesn't relate to the soul.
But the karma will have to still be played out, right?
Well, but by who? Who's playing out the karma? That's the wavy bit of God.
So the karma is only if you choose it or claim it. If
That's
it's
it.
Point and focus.
That's it. When you see that you are not the karma, you're free.
No matter what path you choose.
Yeah, but that seeing has to be single-pointed, has to be clear. It's not just an aha moment. It's a living in alignment with the truth. Oh.
This feels like an aha moment.
it's an aha.
Whoa.
Yeah. Just like the camel. If the camel sees what the driver's doing, then he's free.
It's like a learned helplessness.
If you can see the effect of Maya here, if you can see the play and the way that the play works, then you're free, dear. Huh? If you can see who you are in an integrated way, in a real way. Not just a little taste, but then you're free. Huh. And those who are still in the body are called a Jivan Mukta. Those who are still in the temple and recognize this for what it is and continue to play out the play. But most certainly, people who have died and then come back, and we need to close here shortly, but this is another one that might be helpful. What we call near-death experience is really death. What we call death. It's really what we call death. But we don't know what to call it because we don't know that death is just a part of the play. And so it's not commonly known. And even when we know it, the fear is still there until it's rooted out. But the one who has a near-death experience knows it. For as long as they remain in that body, they know it because they know that they died according to everyone else, but their experience was they never died, right? And it's helpful. There's a lot of work done in this, continuation of consciousness studies and all of this. A lot of work done by modern science even and spiritualists and all of this, but it's so. And so many books that have been written about people who, quote unquote, died, saw themselves on the operating table and all of that, right? Well, have you ever talked with any of those people? Do you know any of them? You might know them. They don't advertise. So we have a dear friend of the Sangha. We have a few who have died. Actually, in the family, we have several. And then because it changes the way you look at life. And now I'm back in the body, but I can't forget that I'm not this body. And so what's the experience of life after that? Well, there's a heck of a lot less fear. Huh? So it doesn't necessarily mean complete realization, but it's akin to it in a way. And so that you can't unknow that. And who knows it? Well, it's a little mysterious, but the soul certainly has less of a bondage to the body by that point. And now you go through life. Well, the Jivan Mukta is the one who has worked it out, not just intellectually, but lives it. Right? Lives in alignment with spirit. Lives in alignment with God. This instrument is only ever thinking of God. This instrument is only ever relating to God because we get it. There's only God here.
And they're free of karma.
And they're therefore free of karma. The karma doesn't stick to me. I'm just saying, that's the approach. It doesn't stick to you. But it doesn't stick only if you've worked it out and you're living in it. And you're living in it. Because it's also possible to get stuck. And so it's very much necessary to root out the demoniacal behaviors and all of this. But that's the truth of the situation. You were never affected by karma, but You are because of the identification with the karmic instrument. And then what happens to it? Well, this karmic instrument has only ever been the 5 elements, Hari. It was never a person. It just appears as a person. Huh? So Ravana is made of the same dust that Hari is made of.
Those like sections really like reflecting to that really helped me understand the 5 elements, and it also helps. Like I have pictured all of you guys dead. Just like,
very good, thank you. That's healthy.
And
And thank you for sharing that. Because some people would think that's morbid.
right.
Somebody might even have a twinge from the ego on it. Because I don't want to think of myself as dead.
Exactly. And I picture and I see that too. Like I can tell, because I've seen in animals either eyes open or closed, and it's just a bag of bones and blood.
Yeah.
But in human, it's the same, and now I can really see you guys differently once I do that visualization.
Yeah, because now you can see us alive.
Yeah, exactly.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now you can see us alive. Because that helps you to end the confusion between what life is and what it is not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This dust is animated. And it is stardust. I mean, it's made of the divine, this dust that's in a particular form right now. It's the same dust in that form and that form and that form and that form and this form and this form. And this form, it's exactly the same dust. So what makes it this shape or that shape or that shape? Does the dust know what shape it's supposed to be in? Sitting out here, does it say, I am destined to be part of Hari? It's only the divine intelligence that forms it in this form or that form, but it's the same dust, Hari. So what happens to the character? Nothing. Because it didn't exist as anything other than dust and an idea. And the ideas go on, but the ideas don't have anything to do with the soul. I love you too. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you. I love you so much, dear Philo. Thank you. Sorry?
So it has to come back in different dust forms.
Yeah, the dust remains the dust. Karma remains karma. Karma is just the law of cause and effect. But the soul can be free. Yeah. Okay, let's close. Final prayer, page 174, and the short version this morning. Lovely discussion this morning. Jai Ma. Jai Gurudev. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtevardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtevardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshiyamam Mritat Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtevardhanam Orvai Rukameva Bandhanan Mrityur Mukshiyamam Mritat Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in thee forever and ever. Humble Sadguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki, and for all of the saints and sages of all the traditions.